On July 12, 2008, the tranquility of Montauk's Ditch Plains Beach was disturbed by a shocking discovery. Jenna Hewitt, 26, and her friends were looking for a place to beach and play ball like they did back in '93. But instead, they stumbled upon something none of them have ever seen before: an unidentified creature. This hairless creature looked part dog, part reptile, part rodent, and had the beak of a bird. It became known as the Montauk Monster. Fixed feelings of curiosity and fear raged in the youth. In an article published later, Jenna Hewitt says, "When we saw this thing, we thought it must have come from Plum Island." The youngsters also took a photo, which soon after went all over the internet. In fact, Plum Island is the only few miles from the crowded population, and the water barrier between the heavily guarded site and the shores doesn't always work. It is for this reason that stories of more than one and two strange things washing up on the shores around abound. But even that's not all. There is fairly strong evidence that the island's laboratories may be responsible for the creation and spread of Lyme disease, which is killing more and more people around the world every year. Creating chemical weapons, monsters, experimenting with unknown viruses and bacteria, and renegade scientists imported from Germany after World War II are just some of the things that Plum Island Animal Disease Center has become associated with. But that sounds very mild compared to what we're going to tell you in the next few minutes. But let's start at the beginning. While many people believe that the island's dark history began after 70 years ago, it actually began long before that. Back in 1897, about 2 miles off the coast of Long Island and about 86 miles from New York City, the Fort Terry military base was built on Plum Island. The island's strategic position provides an excellent view of the Atlantic entrance and the vital Long Island trade. The island was originally owned by the Korchak and Montesset Indian tribes, but was sold to Samuel Willis for a coat, a box of biscuits, and 100 fishing hooks. Fort Terry was built after the federal government acquired the island from Abraham C. Hewitt, former mayor of New London, Connecticut, for $25,000. How Hewitt acquired the property, however, is unclear. A year after the fort was built, the Spanish-American War broke out. There were fears that the Spanish fleet would bombard the east coast of the United States. A number of weapons were purchased from the United Kingdom and hastily installed to provide the Nasset fort system with modern weaponry. By 1914, Fort Terry was already heavily armed and part of the coastal defenses of Long Island. By this time, the fort was becoming a place where some rather strange scientists were venturing, for whom the word humanity did not carry the same meaning as it does for us. For years, it was shrouded in mystery, and people across the water began to speculate about the things that went on there. Then Hitler invaded Poland, and the Japanese decided it was a good time to go to Hawaii. During World War II, the place served as a camp for scholar heads. Anyone Uncle Sam thought could streamline the war process and help the U.S. come up with the next superweapon was drafted into service. Many of these people are taken to Plum Island, of all places. Here they play with physics and chemistry and come up with all sorts of things to give the U.S. a head start in the war. After the peace treaty that ended the military conflict, the fort became a staggering post for Nazi scientists eager to get a shot at the American dream. The island is said to have one of the staging points for Operation Clamor, a secret GIOA, Joint Intelligence Agency program, in which some 1,600 German scientists, engineers, and technicians were given asylum in the United States between 1945 and 1959. At this time on Plum Island, as well as at NASA, if you shouted "Long live Hitler," you were likely to witness an instructive show of hands. In 1952, the island began operating as a center for the Army Chemical Corps, and in 1954, the U.S. was hit economically by a rinderpest epidemic. The U.S. Army then granted the island to the Department of Agriculture. The center is spread over 840 acres and consists of 70 buildings. Plum Island is self-sufficient. It has its own fire department, power plant, water treatment plant, and security force. Animals that are spotted on the island are immediately eliminated by the military and trained snipers. They are always on alert and ready to prevent the potential spread of disease among the island's careful tended animals, as well as the opposite direction. The island has experienced several sporadic epidemics and unconfirmed outbreaks of pathogens. In 1978, an unknown disease affected animals in the area outside the center. All affected creatures were quickly exterminated, although to this day there is no absolute certainty as to whether any of them managed to cross the island's borders and seed the plague. The details of exactly what happened have been classified by the intelligence service. In 2004, 2 foot-and-mouth release incidents at the center led to heightened national interest. Foot-and-mouth disease was eradicated in the U.S. in 1929. The only known cases since then have been on Plum Island. As a result of these events, New York Senator Hillary Clinton and Congressman Tim Bishop sent a letter to the Department of Homeland Security that read, "We urge you to conduct an immediate high-level investigation into these disturbing incidents and notify us of any developments." According to some rumors, the Montauk Monster has escaped from the Plum Island facility. There is also speculation that the creature is related to the Chupacabra, and in one widely circulated hypothesis suggests that these creatures are actually genetically modified monsters created in a lab. The island has a reputation for being a place where mutants, hybrids, and monsters are developed, as well as a variety of horrifying creepy-crawly creatures. In 1992, the island allowed journalists on its territory for the first time. But the visit was organized on a "do not deviate from the marked path" principle, with each of the journalists being closely followed by so-called men in black. This whole well-orchestrated spectacle has one purpose: to allow the anxieties of the residents of Long Island, located just a few kilometers across the bay. Speculation about the activities taking place there is rife. Nobody knows for sure exactly what's being done, and every time a document appears in the media, it is a so-called eradicated that it might as well be a black page with an unrelated phrases visible here and there. The declassified reports have been released thanks to the Freedom of Information Act details some, but not all, of the secret weapon projects carried out in the labs during the Cold War. But even in these, the meaning is almost elusive. Now let's briefly look at some of the most discussed buildings on the island, and then we'll move on to the strange cases associated with it and believed to be the responsibility of the base there. In 1971, New York Times article described the facility as Devil's Island of the deadliest animals disease germs known to man, then described the elaborate security measures. These include round-the-clock patrols around the island's perimeter, building with airlocks to prevent bacteria and viruses from escaping, and tanks to sterilize the wastewater from the mandatory showers that employees take before leaving at the end of their workday. Due to the risk of terrorist attack on the facility, it was transferred to the Department of Homeland Security in 2003. Building 257. It was built back in Fort Terry circa 1911. The main and original purpose of the building was to store weapons. Over the years, Fort Terry has undergone dozens of changes and renovations. In 1952, when the Army Chemical Corps acquired the site, it became a facility for biological warfare research against animals. A secret laboratory performing tests and researching on animals. The goal was to create diseases that would attack the enemy's livestock and thus weaken their food chain supply. In 1954, the facility was turned over to the Department of Agriculture, but as the threat from Russia grew, the experiments did not stop. On the contrary, they simply intensified. Building 101. It is a white T-shaped structure of 164,000 square feet, 15,200 m2. It is located on the northwestern plateau of the island. It is a modernized biological weapons facility that was constructed in 1954 during the transfer from the Army to the Department of Agriculture. Building 101 is the site associated with much of the biological weapons research and testing. In it, scientists play with dozens of pathogens and vectors. Building 101 and 257 are constantly sprayed with chemicals because of the materials used in them. According to the Department of Homeland Security, after being decommissioned and continuously treated with chemicals thereafter, Building 257 currently no longer poses as a health hazard. Mitchell Carroll's 2004 book, Lab 257, claimed a link between the Plum Island Center and outbreaks of 3 infectious diseases: West Nile fever in 1999, Lyme disease in 1975, and Dutch duck plague in 1967. Carroll called the Plum Island lab a ticking biological time bomb. He describes low employee morale and a decline in security after a private company took over maintenance duties at the facility in 1991. Carroll claims in his book that in 2002, U.S. soldiers in Afghanistan discovered a dozer on the Plum Island lab in the home of a nuclear physicist identified by U.S. authorities as the associate of bin Laden. The island is a high-security facility and its work is classified. However, in 2009, a Government Accountability Office report found that there had been a number of safety violations at the base and the security measures were inadequate to prevent accidental release of pathogens and perhaps more. There have been various cases of strange creatures reportedly coming from Plum Island. In 1997, a Connecticut man claimed to have been bitten by a raccoon-like creature that he said escaped from the base. It may have been a creature similar to the one found at Ditch Plains Beach. In 2006, a group of fishermen off the coast of New York claimed to have seen a strange creature swimming in the water. They described it as about 10 feet long with a serpentine body. The fishermen said that in all their years at sea, they had never seen anything like it. They believe the creature is an escaped experiment from the Plum Island base. On January 14, 2010, the body of a black male, about 6 feet tall, with a large build and very long fingers, was discovered on Plum Island. His hands seemed to have some strange mutation. There are no obvious signs of trauma on the body, but there's something very strange. There were 5 holes in the victim's skull, like from an invasive brain surgery or some kind of experiment. In 2012, a Long Island woman claimed she saw a strange creature in her backyard. The woman described it as being about 6 feet tall, with large glowing eyes. She says it entered her house and then disappeared. The woman's story has never been confirmed, but it helps reinforce the belief that strange creatures are being created on Plum Island. But it's all a drop in the ocean because the base may be to blame for one of the cruelest spreading infestations these days. In 1975, the nearby town of Old Lyme, Connecticut, became the epicenter of a strange disease. Children began to get unusual skin rashes, chronic fatigue, and swelling of the knees. It wasn't until 1981 that the bacterial origin of the disease was proven when Borrelia burgdorferi was identified by Willy Burgdorfer, who isolated the causative agent from the tick Dermacentor variabilis. The disease was named Lyme disease. Suspicions are high that the Plum Island researchers have created a new disease that now sickens over 1 million people worldwide each year. These days, doctors are calling the plague the pandemic no one talks about. An amendment to the House of Representatives versions of the National Defense Authorization Act for 2020 directs the government to conduct an investigation into the matter. The author of the amendment, Republican Chris Smith of New Jersey's district, tells Defense One, "I think the allegations are real. Smith has been an active participant in legislative efforts to expand research into the causes and treatment of Lyme disease. Smith says, "We need to find out why so many people are sick. If we want to find out how to treat the disease, why not find out how it got there? If it came about because of bioweapons research, that may provide the key to unraveling it. Perhaps there will also be some accountability for those who did it, as there should be." The strongest argument for a link is simple: Google Maps. You can see that the closest town on the mainland to Plum Island is actually Lyme, Connecticut, where the first causes of Lyme disease were identified in 1975 and 1976. He adds, "Public records show that the scientists at Plum Island have conducted research on many similar kinds of pathogens, as well as on the transmission by insects, though not ticks. But Borrelia burgdorferi was in North America long before it was discovered by Bergedorfer. It was found in the mummy Yahtzee, which is 5,300 years old. The presence of this bacterium long before the 1975 outbreak is used as convincing defense against any connection to Plum Island." Hopefully one day we'll find out the truth, and hopefully soon, because specialists in the field use a number of treatment protocols, but none of that will work effectively in all patients. Each case is individually because the bacteria affects different organs and parts of the body. In addition, the disease is often accompanied by a number of co-infections caused by different bacteria, no less dangerous than Borrelia itself, which further makes everything more complicated. If in one patient one treatment has an effect, in another it may give a different result. This makes the disease extremely difficult to manage, and often patients wander for years in search of the right treatment. This, in addition to a lot of pain and suffering, comes with a serious cost, as health insurances around the world still do not include the disease on their list. And today the islands has been put up for sale by the government, but don't think the experiments are stopping. On the contrary. The mad scientists are going to a new, much larger and state-of-the-art $1.5 billion facility in Manhattan, Kansas. Maybe the reason is that many eyes are now looking at the island. Or maybe their experiments are just getting even bigger. Deepen your adventure by watching our playlist. And if you want more, just play the next episode that comes up as a suggestion on the left.